The massive alien ship floated in the darkness of space like a crystal mountain turned on its side. Inside the ship, beings from across the galaxy sat in a great round room that sparkled with strange lights. The room was so big that clouds formed near the ceiling. Each alien sat in chairs that matched their body type. Some floated in tanks of glowing gas while others hung from the ceiling like giant bats. Ambassador Zixathara looked like a walking diamond with too many arms. Her crystal body caught the light and threw it around the room in rainbow patterns. She held a small device that showed information about the humans of Earth. The other aliens watched her with what might have been amusement if they had faces that could show it. "The humans want more space," Zixathara said. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "They have sent us another request for colonial rights. They want to build homes on a third planet beyond their solar system." A sound like laughter filled the room, but it came from creatures that had no mouths. The Nephilim delegates were beings of pure gas who lived in the atmosphere of giant planets. They spoke by changing the pressure in the air around them. "The small meat creatures want more rocks to stand on," they said through the room's speakers. Council leader Mordock was the strangest of all. He looked like a tree made of metal with eyes scattered across his trunk. Some of the eyes were always watching while others seemed to sleep. When he spoke, all the eyes opened at once. "We have been watching these humans for many years. They are interesting." The word interesting was not a good thing when Mordock said it. The other aliens knew this. They had all been watching Earth for decades. The humans were new to space travel, and they acted very strange compared to other species. Most intelligent life forms were careful. They avoided danger. They lived in safe places and ate safe food and never took risks they did not have to take. Humans were different. They lived on a planet that should have killed them long ago. Their world had storms that could flatten cities, earthquakes that split the ground open, and weather that swung from freezing cold to burning hot. Most planets that supported life were gentle places with mild weather and calm seas. Earth was violent and unpredictable. The humans seemed to like it that way. Kate Sullivan sat in the only chair built for human size in the great room. She was 42 years old with gray hair that she kept pulled back in a simple style. She had been Earth's representative to the Galactic Council for 3 years. In that time, she had learned to read the moods of alien species better than most humans could read each other. Right now, she could tell they were planning something. The aliens were too quiet and too interested in her request. Normally, they would have said yes or no by now. The fact that they were taking time to think about it worried her. "We understand you want to expand," Mordock said. His metal branches creaked when he moved. "Your species grows quickly and needs more room. This is natural." Kate nodded. "Earth's population is still growing. Our first 2 colonies are doing well, but they're almost full. We need more space for our children." "Yes, children," said another voice. This came from Hive Queen Zen, who spoke for all the sectoids. The sectoids looked like ants the size of humans but with larger brains. They never had just one of anything. There were always dozens of them in every room, all thinking the same thoughts. "Humans make many children. Other species make few children. Humans are productive." The way she said productive made it sound like a disease. Zixathara's crystal body flashed brighter. "We have been discussing your request in private council. We believe we have found the perfect world for human expansion." Kate felt her heart speed up. This was it. Earth needed this colony badly. The first two worlds they had been given were good, but small. They could only hold a few million people each. Earth had over 9 billion humans, and the number kept growing. The world is called Kepler 442c in your naming system, Zixthera continued. It has land masses, water, and an atmosphere. It receives the right amount of light from its star to support life. This sounded too good to be true. Kate had learned that when aliens offered something that sounded perfect, there was usually a catch. What are the conditions like? Challenging, Mordock said. All of his eyes blinked at once, which Kate had learned meant he was being careful with his words. Your species seems to enjoy challenges. Around the room, the aliens made sounds that might have been agreement. The Nephilim released pressure waves that sounded like sighing. The sectoids clicked their mandibles in unison. Other species made noises Kate had never heard before. We will transmit the coordinates to your ship, Zixthera said. You may begin planning your colony immediately. Kate knew she should ask more questions. The aliens were being too helpful and too quick to agree, but Earth needed this colony. Every day they waited, more people were born who would need places to live. Thank you, she said. On behalf of Earth and all humanity, I accept this generous offer. The moment she said the words, something changed in the room. The aliens became more excited. The Nephilim swirled faster in their gas clouds. The sectoids rubbed their legs together, making cricket sounds. Even Mordock's metal branches seemed to shake with what might have been laughter. Kate felt a cold feeling in her stomach, but it was too late to take back her words. After Kate left the council chamber, the aliens began what they called a celebration. They had pulled off the greatest joke in galactic history. Kepler 442c was known throughout the galaxy by another name, the Graveyard. It was a world where living things went to die. How long do you think they will last? Asked Hive Queen Zen. No species has survived more than a few days on that world, Mordock replied. Even the Vakar, who are known for their toughness, lasted only 6 days before their colony ship fled. The humans are soft creatures, said one of the Nephilim. They have no natural armor, no poison, no ability to survive in hostile environments. They will die within hours of landing. Zixthera was already preparing the broadcast equipment. This will be the most watched event in galactic history. We can sell viewing rights to every civilized species in 3 spiral arms. The aliens began placing bets on how quickly the humans would die. Some thought it would take days. Others believed the humans would die within hours. A few optimistic aliens thought some humans might last a whole week. None of them bet on the humans surviving. The viewing rights sold quickly across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly became interested in watching them fail spectacularly on the deadliest world known to galactic civilization. The broadcast was scheduled to begin as soon as the human colony ship reached Kepler 442c. Meanwhile, Kate Sullivan sat in her small ship heading back to Earth. She had gotten what she came for, but something felt wrong. The aliens had been too, eager to help. They had offered her a world without asking for anything in return. In 3 years of dealing with them, they had never been that generous. She pulled up the star charts and looked at the coordinates they had given her. Kepler 442c was far from Earth, farther than their other 2 colonies. It was in a region of space that most trade routes avoided. Kate wondered why such a perfect world for human colonization had been left empty for so long. She sent a message ahead to Earth telling them about the new colony world. Within hours, volunteers began signing. Up for the journey. Humans love the idea of exploring new worlds, even dangerous ones, especially dangerous ones. Kate looked out at the stars and tried to shake the feeling that she had just made a terrible mistake. But it was too late now. The wheels were already turning. In 6 months, 50,000 humans would be on their way to a world the aliens had chosen for them. A world the aliens expected would kill them all. 6 months later, the human colony ship drifted toward a world that looked like it was painted with poison. Captain Ryan Hayes stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching Kepler 442c grow larger on the main screen. The planet was beautiful, in a deadly way, with swirling clouds of yellow and green gases and oceans that gleamed like liquid metal. "Atmospheric readings are coming in," said Science Officer Paul Martinez. He was a thin man with dark hair who had spent most of the trip studying what little data they had about their new home. "The air is thick with sulfur compounds. Gravity is 2.3 times Earth normal. Surface temperatures range from -40 to +80 degrees in a single day." "That's a hell of a temperature swing," said Administrator Lisa Chen. She was the person chosen to lead the colony once they landed. Lisa had run 3 cities on Earth and was known for getting things done even when everything went wrong. "What about the wildlife?" "Unknown," Paul replied. "Long-range sensors show large moving objects, but we can't get clear readings through the atmosphere." Ryan had been a ship captain for 20 years. He had brought colonists to dozens of worlds. This one felt different. The other worlds had been carefully chosen by Earth's colonial office after years of study. This world had been a gift from aliens who had never shown much interest in helping humans before. "Sir," called Navigation Officer Danny Rodriguez from his station, "we're getting some strange readings from the surface. There are structures down there." "Structures?" Lisa moved to look at Danny's screen. "What kind of structures?" "Hard to tell. They look artificial, but they're not showing up as active technology. Could be ruins from an old civilization." Ryan felt his worry grow stronger. Nobody had told them about ruins. In fact, nobody had told them much of anything about this world. The aliens had provided coordinates and basic planetary data, but nothing else. "No warnings, no advice, no history. Take us into orbit," Ryan ordered. "Launch the first wave of atmospheric probes. I want to know everything about that world before we send anyone down." The probes launched from the New Horizon like silver bullets, diving down through the poisonous atmosphere toward the surface. Within an hour, the data started flowing back to the ship. What they learned made everyone on the bridge very quiet. The gravity was worse than they thought. At 2.3 times Earth normal, every step would feel like carrying another person on their backs. The air was not just toxic, but actively corrosive. It would eat through most metals in a matter of days. The temperature swings were caused by the planet's unusual rotation, which created massive weather systems that could change from freezing storms to burning heat in hours. Worst of all were the life signs. "I'm reading massive biological signatures," Paul said, his voice tight with concern. "Whatever lives down there is big, really big. The first probe to reach the surface lasted exactly 17 minutes before something destroyed it. The last images it sent back showed creatures that looked like armored wolves the size of earth bears. They moved in packs, and they were smart enough to recognize the probe as something that didn't belong." "Well," said Ryan after they had watched the probe's final moments, "at least we know the locals aren't friendly." Despite the warnings from the probes, the colonists were eager to land. These were not ordinary people. Earth had learned from its earlier colonies that successful colonists needed to be tough, smart, and a little bit crazy. The 50,000 people aboard the New Horizon included farmers who had worked the harshest regions of Earth, engineers who specialized in extreme construction, and survival experts who had lived in places most people considered uninhabitable. Lisa Chen called a meeting of the senior colonists. In the ship's main assembly hall, she stood before representatives from every major group. There was Tony Washington, who had grown food in deserts, Susan Kim, who had studied life in the deepest parts of Earth's oceans, Jake Thompson, who had hunted dangerous animals in Africa and Alaska, Maria Santos, who built bridges in places where bridges shouldn't exist. "I won't lie to you," Lisa told them. "This world is trying to kill us before we even land. The air is poison, the gravity will crush us, and the wildlife seems to think we're food." The colonists listened without panic. These were people who had volunteered to leave Earth forever and build homes on an unknown world. They had expected danger. "However," Lisa continued, "we're humans. We've never let a little danger stop us before. Our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters. They climbed the highest mountains and sailed the roughest seas. They did it with stone tools and wooden ships. We have technology they couldn't dream of." Foreman Bob Mitchell stood up. He was a big man with hands like hammers who had built skyscrapers in earthquake zones. "What's the plan?" "We land in waves," Lisa said. "First wave establishes a base. Camp in the most defensible location we can find. Second wave brings the heavy equipment. Third wave brings families once we know it's safe." "And if it's never safe?" asked Amy Foster, the marine biologist. Lisa smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was determined. "Then we make it safe." The first shuttles launched during what the crew quickly named Hell Week. It was 7 days of the worst weather the planet could throw at them, with storms that could flip aircraft and temperature drops that could freeze human blood. Steve Parker led the first group down. He was a former military officer who had survived in more hostile environments than most people knew existed. The shuttle bucked and shook as it descended through the violent atmosphere. When they finally broke through the clouds and saw the surface, even Steve had to admit it looked like the kind of place demons would call home. The landing site was a rocky plateau next to a cliff face. It offered protection from the wind and a good view of the surrounding area. It also put them right in the middle of what the satellites showed was hunting territory for the local predators. The shuttle's engines had barely shut down when the first death hounds appeared. They came over the ridge like a wave of living armor, moving faster than anything that Big had a right to move. Each one was the size of a small car with jaws that could crush steel and claws that sparked against the rocky ground. There were dozens of them, and they were clearly hungry. "Weapons up!" Steve shouted. The first landing team had brought enough firepower to fight a small war. They had expected dangerous wildlife. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, 12 death hounds lay dead, and the humans had learned their first important lesson about their new home. Everything here was designed to kill them, but everything here could also be killed. "Well," said construction specialist Carol Wright as she looked at the armored hide of the nearest death hound, "at least we won't run out of building materials." Over the next few weeks, more shuttles arrived. The colonists began building their settlement into the cliff face, using the planet's own rock as protection against the weather and the wildlife. They learned to work in the heavy gravity by taking frequent breaks and helping each other with tasks that would have been easy on Earth. The sulfur-rich air burned their lungs even through filters, but the colony's medical officer, Dr. Alan Price, discovered that humans could adapt to it gradually. After a few weeks, most colonists found they needed their breathing apparatus less often. Tony Washington made the first breakthrough with food production. The soil was toxic to most earth plants, but he found that some hardy species could not only survive, but thrive in the harsh conditions. The sulfur that made the air poisonous also made the soil incredibly fertile for the right crops. Susan Kim discovered that the metal-colored oceans were rich in minerals that Earth desperately needed for advanced technology. The acid seas that should have dissolved anything organic actually contained complex ecosystems of creatures adapted to the harsh chemistry. Most importantly, Jake Thompson figured out how to hunt the death hounds safely. He learned their pack behavior, their migration patterns, and their weaknesses. The creatures that were supposed to be humanity's doom became a source of food, materials, and even companionship as smaller, younger ones were captured and slowly domesticated. By the end of the first month, the impossible was happening. The human colony was not just surviving, it was growing. More shuttles arrived every week, bringing new colonists who had heard about the challenges and decided they wanted to be part of the solution. Children born on the journey adapted to the heavy gravity better than adults. Teenagers who had grown up on the ship found the extreme conditions exciting rather than terrifying. The colony's school taught classes on death hound behavior alongside traditional subjects. Meanwhile, in the galaxy beyond, the alien audiences who had paid to watch humanity's spectacular failure were getting something very different from what they had expected. The viewing numbers kept growing as more and more species tuned in to watch the impossible sight of humans not just surviving on the graveyard, but actually seeming to enjoy themselves. The joke was turning into something else entirely, and the aliens who had planned it were beginning to realize they might have made a very serious mistake. 3 months after the first landing, the impossible had become routine. The human settlement, which the colonists had named Haven, was not just surviving but growing stronger every day. What had started as a desperate struggle for survival had turned into something that looked almost like success. Maria Santos stood on the observation deck of the main colony building, watching the morning shift change. Workers were heading out to the mineral extraction sites, while others returned from the night shift at the atmospheric processing plants. They moved with the slow, steady pace that came from living in heavy gravity, but they moved with purpose and confidence. Processing Plant 3 is running at full capacity, reported her assistant, Kevin Moore. He was a young engineer who had adapted to the harsh world better than most. We're converting sulfur compounds faster than we can use them. Maria nodded. The atmospheric processors had been her greatest achievement so far. Instead of just filtering the poisonous air to make it breathable, she had designed them to break down the toxic chemicals and turn them into useful industrial materials. The sulfur that made the air deadly was now providing the colony with compounds needed for everything from medicine to explosives. "What about the new construction project?" Maria asked. "Bob's team finished the foundation yesterday. They're using the new concrete mixture that Carol developed. It's actually stronger in this gravity than regular concrete would be on Earth." The construction boom was another sign of how well the humans were adapting. Bob Mitchell had discovered that building in 2.3 times Earth gravity required completely different techniques. But once you figured out how to do it, the structures were incredibly strong. Haven's buildings could withstand storms. That would flatten most Earth cities. Down in the agricultural sector, Tony Washington was having his own moment of triumph. He stood in the middle of a field of green plants that were growing in soil that should have killed them. The crops weren't. Exactly like anything from Earth, but they provided good nutrition and they seemed to love the harsh conditions. "How's the yield looking?" asked his partner, Helen Grant. She was a botanist who had spent years developing plants that could grow in extreme conditions. "Better than our best projections," Tony replied. "The sulfur content in the soil is acting like a super fertilizer. We're getting 3 times the growth rate we expected." The food production had been one of their biggest worries when they first landed. The colony had brought enough supplies to last 2 years, but they needed to become self-sufficient quickly. Now it looked like they might actually have surplus food to store for emergencies. "And the livestock adaptation program?" Helen asked. Tony grinned. "The chickens are doing better here than they did on Earth. The heavy gravity is making them stronger, and they seem to like the mineral content in the processed water." At the Marine Research Station, Susan Kim was making discoveries that excited scientists back on Earth. The acid seas that should have been lifeless were actually teeming with creatures that had evolved incredible adaptations to the harsh chemistry. "Look at this," she said to her research partner, Gary Lewis. She held up a sample container with what looked like a metallic crab. "This creature doesn't just survive in the acid water, it actually uses the acid as part of its digestive process." "And the nutritional analysis?" Gary asked. "Complete protein, high mineral content, and it actually tastes pretty good once you neutralize the acid properly. We could feed the whole colony on what's in just one small bay." The marine life had turned out to be one of their greatest resources. The creatures were not only edible, but provided materials that were useful for everything, from construction to medicine. The colony's medical officer had developed several new treatments using compounds extracted from the local sea life. But perhaps the most important adaptation was happening with the colonists themselves. Dr. Alan Price had been documenting the physical changes that were occurring in humans who lived on the harsh world for extended periods. "The children are showing remarkable adaptation," he told Lisa Chen during their weekly health briefing. "Those born during the journey and raised in heavy gravity are developing stronger bone density and more efficient cardiovascular systems." "What about the psychological effects?" Lisa asked. "That's the most interesting part. The colonists aren't just adapting physically, they're thriving mentally. Depression rates are actually lower than they were on Earth. People seem genuinely happy to be here." This was perhaps the strangest part of the whole situation. Logic said that living on a world that was constantly trying to kill you should make people miserable. Instead, the colonists seemed energized by the challenge. Children who had grown up on the journey thought the death hounds were fascinating, rather than terrifying. Teenagers had developed sports that used the extreme terrain as part of the game. Jake Thompson had become the colony's expert on local wildlife, and he was discovering that the death hounds were far more complex than anyone had realized. The pack hunters were intelligent, loyal to their families, and capable of forming bonds with humans who showed them respect. "We've got 3 juveniles who are almost fully domesticated," he reported to the Colony Council. "They're protective of human children, and they're excellent at detecting danger that our sensors miss." "Are you seriously suggesting we turn the apex predators into pets?" asked Administrator Chen. "I'm suggesting we turn them into partners," Jake replied. "They know this world better than we ever will. Working with them instead of against them makes us all safer." The domestication program was just one example of how the humans were turning everything about the deadly world to their advantage. Amy Foster had developed techniques for harvesting the acid-resistant algae that grew in the seas, creating another food source and a biological filter system for the water processing plants. Engineer teams led by Danny Rodriguez had figured out how to use the extreme temperature swings to generate power. The daily cycle from freezing cold to burning heat created pressure differentials that could drive turbines more efficiently than wind or solar power. Even the daily weather extremes had become useful. The colonists had learned to schedule different activities for different parts of the day. Heavy construction happened during the cool morning hours. Indoor work and planning happened during the hot afternoon periods. Evening was for maintenance and social activities. Most remarkably, the second generation of colonists was already showing signs of considering Haven home rather than just a place they were stuck. Children who had been born during the journey, or in the early days of the colony, didn't think of Earth as home. They thought of the heavy gravity, the poisonous air, and the dangerous wildlife as normal. "Mom, why would anyone want to live on Earth?" asked 8-year-old Lucy Parker during a video call with her grandmother back home. "It sounds so boring. No death hounds, no acid seas, no real challenges." Her grandmother, watching from her comfortable apartment in Chicago, didn't know how to answer that question. The viewing figures across the galaxy continued to climb as more and more alien species tuned in to watch the impossible sight of humans not just surviving, but thriving on the graveyard. What had started as cruel entertainment had become something closer to a documentary about an impossible success story. In the crystal chambers of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Zixathera was experiencing something her species had never felt before: worry. The joke was supposed to have been over months ago. The humans should have fled or died within days of landing. Instead, they were building cities, raising families, and apparently enjoying themselves on a world that had killed every other species, that had tried to settle it. "The economic implications are becoming clear," she reported to the council. "The humans are extracting resources from Kepler 442c that we never knew existed. Their survival technologies could revolutionize colonial efforts across the galaxy." Council leader Mordoc's metal branches creaked ominously. "How is this possible? The graveyard has claimed thousands of lives from dozens of species. How can these soft creatures succeed where warriors and survivors have failed?" "Perhaps," suggested Hive Queen Zen, "we underestimated the humans." It was the first time in galactic history that any council member had admitted to underestimating another species. The implications of that admission were beginning to ripple through alien civilization like waves from a dropped stone. Back on Haven, the colonists continued their daily lives, unaware that they were rewriting the rules of what was considered possible in the galaxy. They were too busy building their future to worry about what aliens thought of their success. Children played games that would terrify most galactic species. Adults worked jobs that were impossibly dangerous by alien standards. Everyone seemed to consider their harsh, deadly world to be exactly where they belonged. The joke had stopped being funny. Now it was becoming something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. 2 years after the great joke began, Ambassador Zixathara stood before the Galactic Council with news that made her crystal body flicker with what her species called distress. The viewing screens around the council chamber showed images from Haven that would have been impossible to believe if they weren't being broadcast live across the galaxy. "The human colony now has 75,000 residents," she reported, her voice creating sharp notes that hurt the air. "They are not just surviving, they are expanding." The images showed human children riding on the backs of domesticated death hounds. Construction crews were building a second city, using materials extracted from the acid seas. Farms stretched across valleys that should have been lifeless wastelands. Most disturbing of all, the humans looked happy. Council leader. Mordoc's eyes, focused and unfocused in patterns that showed deep concern. How many species have we tested on that world over the centuries? 47 different species have attempted to establish colonies on Kepler 442c, replied the Council's chief historian, a floating brain in a jar of glowing liquid. The longest any group survived was 8 days. Most died within hours. And yet the humans not only survive but thrive, said Hive Queen Zen. Her clicking mandibles showed agitation. Our intelligence networks report that they have begun exporting goods. This was the part that truly worried the galactic powers. Haven wasn't just succeeding as a colony, it was becoming an economic force. The metals they extracted from the planet's core using techniques no other species had developed were purer than anything available on the galactic market. Their biomedical research, born from necessity in the harsh environment, had led to treatments that could help species across the galaxy. Show them the economic projections, Zixthera commanded. New screens lit up with charts and graphs that made several council members make sounds of distress. Haven's industrial output was growing exponentially. Within 5 years, their metal production would rival some of the galaxy's major industrial worlds. Their medical exports were already disrupting established pharmaceutical markets. "This is impossible," declared Ambassador Vex of the Talon Empire. His species looked like reptilian. Eagles and prided themselves on being the galaxy's greatest survivors. "My people are known throughout the galaxy for our ability to adapt to harsh conditions. We lasted only 4 days on that world before our entire expedition died. The Vakar attempted colonization with our most elite survival units," added War Chief Grak. The Vakar were a warrior species that had conquered dozens of worlds through pure toughness. They were equipped with the best armor and weapons in the galaxy. The planet killed them all in 6 days. Yet humans, with their primitive technology and soft bodies, have turned it into a garden world, Mordock observed. The question we must ask ourselves is, what does this mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? The answer to that question was already becoming clear. Other human colonies had begun requesting technology transfers from Haven. Earth's standing in Galactic politics had risen dramatically as other species realized that humanity possessed survival capabilities that no one had suspected. Back on Haven, Dr. Paul Martinez was making a discovery that would change everything. He stood in a deep cave system that the colonists had found while mining for rare metals. The walls were covered with symbols that were clearly artificial, but they were millions of years old. "This isn't natural," he told his research team. "These formations, the way the planet's systems interact, even the wildlife patterns. This world was designed." Research assistant Jennifer Walsh looked up from her equipment readings. "Designed how?" "As a test," Paul replied, running his hands over ancient symbols carved into stone that predated human civilization by millions of years. "Someone built this world to be the ultimate survival challenge. The gravity, the atmosphere, the wildlife, even the extreme weather patterns. They're all connected in ways that seem natural but are actually engineered." The implications were staggering. Haven wasn't just a naturally occurring death world. It was an artificial testing ground created by some ancient civilization to determine which species could survive under the worst possible conditions. Humanity hadn't just survived a natural disaster of a planet. They had passed a test that was specifically designed to be impossible. "Send this data to Earth immediately," Paul ordered. "And make sure a copy goes to the Galactic Council. They need to understand what they actually sent us to." The revelation reached the council chambers just as they were debating what to do about the human success. The ancient symbols and the engineering analysis proved that Kepler 442c had been artificially created as the ultimate survival test. The beings who built it had designed it to challenge every aspect of what made a species capable of surviving in space. The test measured not just physical survival, but adaptability, innovation, cooperation, and the ability to turn disadvantages into advantages, the Council's xenoarchaeologist reported. Based on the symbolic instructions we've decoded, passing this test was meant to identify species ready for expansion to the most challenging environments in the galaxy. The silence in the Council chamber was profound. Every species represented there understood the implications. The humans hadn't just survived their cruel joke, they had passed the galaxy's ultimate test of survival capability. A test that no other known species had even come close to passing. Meanwhile, on Earth, the news of Haven's success had triggered the largest colonial application boom in human history. The waiting list to join the colony now stretched to over 2 million people. Families were selling everything they owned for a chance to start new lives on a world that the rest of the galaxy considered uninhabitable. Captain Ryan Hayes, now Governor Hayes, stood in his office overlooking the growing city of Haven. Through his window, he could see human children playing with young death hounds in the colony's Central Park. Construction crews were building a university where the galaxy's most extreme survival techniques would be studied and taught. Farmers were expanding the agricultural zones into areas that had once been considered too dangerous for human presence. The Earth Council wants to know if we need any support, reported Communications Officer Linda Torres. They're offering to send additional supplies, equipment, personnel, whatever we need. Ryan smiled. Tell them we appreciate the offer, but we're doing fine. In fact, ask them if Earth needs anything from us. We've got a surplus of rare metals and some medical supplies that might be useful. It was a conversation that would have been impossible 2 years earlier. The colony that was supposed to be humanity's greatest failure had become one of its greatest successes. More importantly, it had demonstrated human capabilities that no one, not even humans themselves, had fully understood. The economic disruption was spreading across the galaxy. Species that had dominated certain markets for thousands of years suddenly found themselves competing with human innovations born from necessity on the harshest world anyone had ever successfully colonized. Trade routes were shifting as other species sought access to Haven's unique products and technologies. But the real change was psychological. For the first time in galactic history, humanity was not seen as a minor species that might someday become important. They were recognized as a major power with capabilities that other species couldn't match. Ambassador Kate Sullivan, now promoted to head of Human Galactic Relations, found herself in meetings with alien leaders who had previously ignored her completely. Species that had never bothered to learn human names were suddenly very interested in establishing trade relationships and learning about human survival techniques. The Altaran Confederation wants to establish a joint research station, she reported to Earth during her weekly briefing. They want to study human adaptation techniques. The Vorthon Empire is offering mineral rights to 3 star systems in exchange for access to Haven's atmospheric processing technology. The offers kept coming. Species across the galaxy wanted to understand how humans had succeeded where everyone else had failed. They wanted to learn the techniques that had turned certain death into comfortable living. They wanted partnerships with the species that had passed the ultimate test. Back in the council chambers, the debate continued about what to do with this unexpected situation. The joke had backfired so completely that it had shifted the entire balance of galactic power. Humanity had gone from being a curiosity to being a species that other civilizations needed to take seriously. We could revoke their colonial rights, suggested one council member. On what grounds? Mordok asked. They have succeeded beyond all expectations. They have earned their place through achievement. We could limit their expansion, offered another. How? They've proven they can survive on worlds we consider uninhabitable. Half the galaxy's unclaimed territory is composed of death worlds that we've written off as impossible to colonize. 5 years after the Great Joke began, the Galactic Council faced a reality that none of them had ever imagined possible. The humans had not only survived on the graveyard, but had turned it into one of the most prosperous colonies in known space. Haven now hosted over 100,000 residents who considered the deadly world their home. Ambassador Kate Sullivan walked through the halls of the Galactic Council building with a confidence that would have been impossible during her first visit. She was no longer the representative of a minor species begging for colonial rights. She was the voice of a civilization that had proven itself capable of achievements that stunned the galaxy. The meeting today was different from any that had come before. Instead of humans asking for permission to expand, the Galactic Council was asking humans to solve problems that had stumped alien civilizations for centuries. The proposal before us today concerns 3 worlds that we have classified as impossible to inhabit, announced Council Leader Mordok. His metal branches had grown duller over the years as the stress of humanity's success wore on him. Zerion Prime, Inferno Station, and the world you call Deathstorm 7. Kate looked at the data about each world on her personal display. Zerion Prime was a planet of constant volcanic activity with radiation levels that would cook most organic life in minutes. Inferno Station was a world so close to its star that the surface was literally molten metal during the day. Deathstorm 7 had weather systems so violent that previous survey teams had been torn apart by winds that moved faster than bullets. These worlds contain resources that the galaxy desperately needs, continued Mordok, but no known species can survive on them long enough to establish extraction operations. And you want humans to try, Kate said. It wasn't a question. We want humans to succeed, replied Ambassador Zixathara. Her crystal body had developed stress fractures over the years as she watched humanity's impossible rise. Based on your species performance on Kepler 442c, we believe you may be the only beings capable of making these worlds livable. Kate smiled. The same aliens who had sent humans to die as entertainment were now paying them to colonize worlds that everyone else considered hopeless. What are you offering? The terms were generous beyond anything humans had ever been offered before. Full colonial rights to all 3 worlds, plus mineral rights to their entire star systems, plus technology transfers that would advance human civilization by centuries. The aliens were essentially bribing humanity to do something everyone believed was impossible. We accept, Kate said without hesitation. Back on Haven, the news of the 3 new colonial assignments caused excitement rather than fear. The 3rd generation of colonists had grown up thinking that impossible challenges were just interesting problems waiting to be solved. Children who had been born on the harsh world considered the idea of living somewhere easy to be boring. Governor Ryan Hayes called a meeting of the Colonial Council to discuss the new assignments. The same people who had turned a Deathworld into a garden were already making plans for worlds that were even more hostile. Zerion Prime will require underground construction, said Bob Mitchell, now the colony's chief of engineering. His hair had gone gray from years of heavy gravity, but his enthusiasm for impossible building projects had only grown stronger. The radiation and volcanic activity mean we'll need to go deep and use natural rock formation for shielding. The constant seismic activity could actually work in our favor, added Maria Santos. We can use the volcanic energy for power generation and the underground thermal vents for heating and industrial processes. Tony Washington, whose agricultural programs had fed the growing colony for years, was already thinking about food production on worlds where farming seemed impossible. Xerion Prime has mineral-rich soil from all that volcanic activity. With the right hydroponic systems and radiation shielding, we could probably grow more food there than we do here. The planning session continued for hours as the colonists discussed each of the 3 new worlds with the same enthusiasm that most people reserved for vacation destinations. They talked about radiation as if it were weather, volcanic activity as if it were a useful neighbor, and storms that could destroy cities as if they were minor inconveniences. Dr. Paul Martinez had made additional discoveries about Haven's origins. That explained why humans were succeeding where others failed. The ancient civilization that had built the world as a test had designed it specifically to challenge the qualities that made humans unique among galactic species. The test wasn't just about survival, he explained to a gathering of Earth's top scientists via video link. It was about adaptation, innovation, cooperation under stress, and the ability to find opportunity in disaster. These are specifically human traits. What do you mean specifically human? Asked Dr. Elizabeth Morris from the University of Chicago. Most galactic civilizations develop along predictable patterns, Paul replied. They find safe worlds, eliminate dangers, and create stable societies. Humans are the only species that actively seeks out challenges and treats disasters as opportunities for growth. This was the key to understanding humanity's galactic success. While other species tried to avoid problems, humans looked for ways to turn problems into advantages. The poisonous atmosphere became a source of industrial chemicals. The dangerous gravity became a way to build stronger structures. The deadly wildlife became partners and resources. 6 months later, the first colonial ships departed for the 3 impossible worlds. Each carried 10,000 volunteers who were excited about the challenge of making uninhabitable worlds into homes. The galaxy watched with the same fascination that had made the original Haven broadcast the most watched program in galactic history. The results exceeded even human expectations. Within a year, all 3 colonies had not only survived, but were beginning to export resources. Xerion Prime's volcanic forges produced metals of unprecedented purity. Inferno Station's extreme solar exposure powered energy collection systems that supplied power to entire star systems. Deathstorm 7's violent weather patterns were harnessed to generate more electricity than some civilizations used in a century. But perhaps the most significant change was happening in the children. The 4th generation of human colonists, those born on the various Deathworlds, were developing capabilities that seemed almost supernatural to older generations. Children who grew up in extreme gravity were stronger and faster than Earth humans. Those raised in high radiation environments had immune systems that could handle toxins that would kill their grandparents. The ones from high-energy worlds could process information and react to danger faster than human reflexes had ever allowed. We're not just adapting to these worlds, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, Haven's chief medical officer and daughter of the original marine biologist Susan Kim. We're evolving with them. Each generation is more capable than the last. The galactic implications were staggering. Humanity was not just surviving on impossible worlds, they were becoming better at it with each generation. The species that Other civilizations had dismissed as primitive was developing capabilities that no other known life form possessed. Ambassador Kate Sullivan found herself in the unprecedented position of other species asking to join human colonies. The Altaran wanted to send scientists to study human adaptation techniques. The Vorthon requested permission to establish research stations on human Deathworlds. Even the proud Vakar warriors asked for training in human survival methods. "It's ironic," Kate observed during a private conversation with Governor Hayes. "They sent us to die as entertainment, and now they want to learn from us to stay alive." The most significant moment came when the Galactic Council made an offer that shocked everyone involved. They wanted to establish a new category of colonial world, human-only zones, where other species would pay humans to establish colonies on worlds too dangerous for anyone else. "You would become the galaxy's professional colonists," Mordock explained during the formal presentation. "Worlds that we cannot touch, you would make habitable. Resources that we cannot reach, you would extract. In return, humanity would receive technology, territory, and a position of respect in galactic civilization that no species has ever achieved." The offer was everything Earth had dreamed of when they first applied for colonial rights years earlier. Unlimited expansion opportunities, advanced technology, and recognition as a major galactic power, all in exchange for doing what humans apparently did better than anyone else, turning impossible situations into opportunities for growth. Kate looked around the council chamber at the alien faces that had once viewed humanity with amusement and contempt. Now those same beings watched her with something approaching awe. The joke had become a revolution, and humanity was no longer asking for permission to expand among the stars. They were being paid to lead the way. The final scene showed the newest human colony ship, the New Frontier, approaching a world that made all the previous death worlds look pleasant. The planet was tidally locked to its star, with one side perpetually frozen and the other perpetually burning, connected by a narrow band of eternal twilight swept by storms that could shatter mountains.